Hi, my name is William Vickery. I'm a first-generation American who's a dual citizen, so both a citizen of the United States and the United Kingdom. The only family I have living in the United States are my parents and my brother. Everyone else lives in Europe. Both my parents are from the UK. One's from Wales and one is from the West Country. So yeah, it's good fun. The biggest thing was, I guess, coming from Europe to Texas, not necessarily the United States, because Texas is, the example I came up with is going from England to any other foreign language country in Europe is almost easier than coming to Texas, because the cultures in Texas is so much different. Now that they've been living here for over 25 years, it's not a big issue at all. But the politics, the way people interact with each other is very different in Texas. So one example is just day-to-day interactions with random people, like saying, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" Or like with a friend, like, "Oh, yeah, we should totally grab lunch sometime." Is in the UK, if someone said, "Oh, let's grab lunch next week," that you're actually going to set up a time to go grab lunch next week, rather than in Texas or the US, it's more just a social thing that you say, like, let's go hang out or something. I think there are a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. I think the biggest difference would be topic, but the very similar in politics. So in the UK right now, they have a lot of problems with immigration from Eastern Bloc countries, such as Poland and the Ukraine. Whereas here we also have immigration problems with Mexico and Canada, etc. But I'd say one of the probably biggest social differences would be definitely guns. Guns is a huge difference. Everyone in most people in the UK don't get the fascination with guns as people in the US do, and I think it definitely stems from the idea of that's in the Constitution with the Second Amendment rights to bear arms. So I think that's probably the biggest difference would be guns. One thing that I think something that take for granted is transportation. In Europe, compared to the US, it's way easier to travel. So if I was living in the UK and I wasn't from the US, then I'd be able to take a train or something very easily to go visit my grandparents. Because the United Kingdom can fit inside of Texas 3 times. So being able to travel is easier in Europe. Here you have to have a car to get anywhere. When I was a kid, I had a bike, but I couldn't drive anywhere because the roads are ridiculous. In the UK, you can bike everywhere. And similarly, if I wanted to go visit other countries or go to France, it's way easier, especially with the European Union, to be able to go to different countries across Europe. Whereas in the US, you can go to different states, but it's so huge, it's very expensive. Mm-hmm. So I think travel is something very different that you may not necessarily be like, oh, I just drive somewhere, but people don't travel as much as you do in Europe. I think they are very different. So here in the U.S. you go to grade school and then you have university or college, whereas in Europe and in the UK you have grade school. You have a primary and a secondary school, and then you also do have university. Except in Europe and in the UK, there's more of a split between general education and then either going to university or a trade school, as I guess you'd call it in the US. So some people will, after, you could say, the 8th grade here in the US, would go and get apprenticeship to be an electrician, or go to a technical college rather than a university, where you have, like here at UT. Or some people will go through grade school and take their examinations like you do here, and then go to a university and get degrees like that. But in the U.S., unless you go to the university, you can't really get jobs as easily. So apprenticeships and technical colleges in Europe are a lot more valued than they are in the U.S. I would say they are on a similar level, but they are handled differently. So it's definitely because, I guess, they are different sports. You don't have American football, and it's more soccer and rugby in the UK. They're both incredibly intense, like in the US. Your rivalries for football and baseball and basketball are incredibly intense. But it's just a different culture. So in the UK, soccer is a huge sport, and so it's also a lot closer. So you have these huge fandoms that live 20 miles away, and in the 60s and 50s, after sporting events, you'd have riots in cities, which doesn't necessarily sound as crazy, but it's not like burning down the entire city. But yeah, people fight all the time. Now it's a calmed down a lot more, but it's similar intensity, just a different culture. When I've come to the university, I've appreciated sports more. Being in band here, it's all about football. So I've gotten a lot more into watching NFL football and college football. So I guess my exposure, I prefer American sports, but I definitely love watching rugby. Rugby is just something totally different. It's incredibly fast-paced and very violent, so it's good fun to watch. I have to preface that I've only ever lived in the United States. I have not lived in the UK. So had I lived there, I'd probably have a lot more precedent and context on what it's like to actually live with it. I appreciate it because it's something that I find makes the United Kingdom very unique. But there are a lot of different opinions on the monarchy. Some people want to get rid of it because they take people's taxes, but I really don't know a lot of the nitty-gritty, but some people see them as this family that's on a high horse that doesn't really do anything, which is true. They are a huge part of the UK, and they have it. The Queen has a national image, and she's the head of state, but a lot of the politics is run by Parliament, so there's not. It's more of just what people think rather than more of a governmental role. And over Christmas is one thing. The Queen addresses the nation, similar, I guess, to the presidential address, but it's always at Christmas. It's something everyone sits down and you watch the Queen, and so I think a lot of people appreciate them. But yeah, no, I definitely try and watch those things, and when we're in the UK at Christmas, we watch the Queen's speech. I definitely try to stay up at 3 a.m. to watch the royal wedding, because that stuff doesn't happen. It's a huge pomp and circumstance. It's good fun to watch. They are similar. So the Congress is a two-house system, and similar in the UK. You have the High House and the Lower House. You have House of Lords and the House of Commons. So you have basically the Senate and the Representatives. It's very different because it's a parliamentary system compared to a representative democracy. So the politics, I would say, are very similar. They have a lot of issues going on with immigration, similar to the U.S. One of the biggest differences, I would say, though, is that the United States has a two-party system with the Democrats and the Republicans, and similarly in the UK you have conservatives and all these different parties. And there are, you could say, two bigger parties, but the biggest thing is that in the UK there are a lot more smaller parties that are just as strong, and so it's easier to have a coalition government where you have multiple parties running the government at once, which happened this past election cycle. There was no majority of one or the other, so there was a coalition government that was not just a majority of one party running the government, which I think is incredibly interesting. In the U.S., the Democratic Party couldn't run everything very easily. You can't have very much change in political parties in the U.S. I would probably identify more with, I like to think of myself as more British than American, just because that's how I like to stick out. That's a big part of my heritage is from the UK, because I was raised under a British household, so that's where all my parents knew, and so that's what I was raised up. I wasn't in a typical American family that had been here for years on years and years. But I definitely, culturally, I'm probably definitely way more American than I am British. Because all my friends, the education that I've gone through, and going through high school, and all the friends there, and then going to the University of Texas, and the culture that's here, Austin. It's all good fun. Yeah, I'd probably say, I guess, more American than British, but I definitely like to think of myself British, and I try and tell people as often as possible. Definitely. Just because of the way, not in a huge amount, but I definitely do speak a bit differently. I use different terminology. But it's not a huge culture difference. I'm not really speaking another language. Just minor ways of using different terminology. I pronounce things with a slight English twang, I guess is a way to say it. Like a few words like strawberry. People tell me when I get angry, which I do a lot, I have a bit of a temper, they hear the really horrible accent that I have come out more. But other than they just pick up on things I say, just how I say them slightly different.